Captain Daeho Kim stood in front of the spaceport's massive window, watching the sunrise over New Seoul. His fingers tapped nervously against his worn military ID card. After 15 years of serving in the Earth Defense Force, he was finally taking a vacation. A first-class ticket to Nova Centauri wasn't cheap, but he had saved enough credits to treat himself. Last call for Stellar Lines Flight 447 to Nova Centauri. First-class passengers may now board through Gate 12. The announcement echoed through the terminal. Daeho straightened his civilian clothes and walked to the gate. The boarding process was smooth, and soon he found himself in the luxurious first-class cabin of the interstellar ship. The cabin looked more like a fancy hotel lobby than a spacecraft, with its soft lighting and comfortable seats that could turn into beds. "Sir, would you like something to drink before takeoff?" A flight attendant appeared beside his seat. "Yes, please. Your strongest drink," Daeho said. He wasn't usually a drinker, but space travel made him nervous, despite his military background. As the attendant brought him a glass of blue liquid that sparkled like stars, Daeho noticed something unusual. The passengers around him were mostly wealthy business people and politicians, but one seat remained empty, a specially modified seat that seemed much larger than the others. The ship's engines hummed to life, and just as they were about to close the doors, heavy footsteps echoed through the cabin. Daeho looked up, and his mouth fell open. Through the door came the tallest being he had ever seen. The alien was at least 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders and skin that shimmered like polished bronze. He wore what looked like a very expensive suit, custom-made for his massive frame. 2 assistants hurried behind him, carrying diplomatic bags marked with the seal of the Centaurian embassy. "Ambassador Shaq, welcome aboard," the chief flight attendant said, bowing deeply. "Your special accommodation is ready." The alien nodded gracefully and moved toward his seat, which happened to be right across the aisle from Daeho. As the ambassador sat down, Daeho couldn't help but stare. He had seen aliens before, but never one so impressive. The blue drink in Daeho's system was starting to make him feel warm and a bit too relaxed. He watched as the ambassador tried to adjust his seat's controls with his large fingers. "Having trouble with the buttons, big guy," Daeho said, his voice louder than he intended. "You know, you remind me of someone I saw in old Earth videos, a basketball player. They called him Shaq too." The cabin went completely silent. One of the ambassador's assistants gasped. The chief flight attendant's face turned pale. Ambassador Shaq slowly turned his head toward Daeho. His 4 eyes, all a deep shade of gold, focused on the human. The ambassador's expression was unreadable, but the tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Interesting observation, Captain Kim," the ambassador said in a deep, resonant voice. Daeho felt a chill run down his spine. How did the alien know his military rank? "I am familiar with Earth's historical sports figures," the ambassador continued. "However, comparing a Centaurian high diplomat to an entertainment figure is considered problematic in our culture." A young woman in a flight security uniform quickly approached them. Her nameplate read Lieutenant Ji Young Park. "Is everything all right here, Ambassador?" she asked, her hand resting carefully on her standard-issue stunner. The ambassador raised one of his 4-fingered hands. "No need for concern, Lieutenant. However, I believe Captain Kim here has inadvertently initiated a Centaurian challenge of honor." Daeho's alcohol-induced confidence vanished instantly. He had studied alien protocols during his military service, and the words "challenge of honor" made his blood run cold. I apologize, Ambassador. I meant no disrespect," Daeho stammered, suddenly very aware of how dry his mouth felt. "Oh, but the words have been spoken," Ambassador Shaq said, his voice carrying a hint of what might have been amusement. "And as per the Third Galactic Convention of Cultural Exchange, such challenges must be honored when issued on neutral ground, which this vessel certainly is." Lieutenant Park looked between the two of them, her professional calm masking her concern. "Ambassador, Surely there's a diplomatic solution. The solution is diplomatic, Lieutenant, the ambassador interrupted. Captain Kim will participate in the Challenge of Honor during our journey to Nova Centauri. The outcome may have interesting implications for Earth-Centauri relations. Other passengers were pretending not to listen, but Daeho could see them sneaking glances and probably recording everything on their neural implants. He had a sinking feeling that this would end up on the galactic social networks before they even left Earth's atmosphere. One of the ambassador's assistants stepped forward with a formal-looking digital tablet. Captain Kim, you have 12 Earth hours to prepare. The challenge will test your physical abilities, mental acuity, and the assistant paused for effect, your cultural sensitivity. Daeho slumped in his seat as the ship began its ascent into space. Through the window, he could see Earth getting smaller, and he had never felt more foolish. His first vacation in years, and he had somehow managed to turn it into an interstellar incident. The blue drink sat half-finished on his armrest. He pushed it away, but not before noticing something odd. The liquid had changed color to a deep purple, indicating it was much weaker than standard spacer alcohol. Had someone deliberately served him a mild drink to lower his inhibitions without actually impairing his judgment? As if reading his thoughts, Ambassador Shaq turned to him again. Do not be too troubled, Captain. Sometimes the greatest diplomatic breakthroughs come from the most unexpected situations. Was that a smile on the ambassador's face? It was hard to tell with Centaurian facial features. Lieutenant Park was speaking quietly into her communication device, likely reporting the incident to the ship's captain. Other crew members were hurriedly consulting their cultural protocol databases, and somewhere in the ship's communication system, messages were probably already flying between Earth and Nova Centauri about this unexpected development. Daeho closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His military training kicked in. When in an unexpected situation, assess your resources and plan your strategy. He had 12 hours to prepare for whatever this challenge would be. He opened his eyes and found Ambassador Shaq still watching him with what seemed like genuine interest. Ambassador, Daeho said carefully, since I am now committed to this challenge, may I at least ask what's at stake? The ambassador's answer made the entire cabin go silent again. Why, Captain Kim, only the future of Earth's position in the Galactic Defense Coalition. No pressure, of course. This time, the ambassador was definitely smiling. The ship's engines hummed steadily as they broke through Earth's atmosphere, carrying them toward what would either be a diplomatic disaster or, just possibly, humanity's biggest breakthrough since first contact. And it all started because Daeho Kim couldn't keep his mouth shut about an ancient basketball player. As the blue marble of Earth disappeared behind them, Daeho made a mental note. Next vacation, he was taking the economy class. 6 hours into the flight to Nova Centauri, Daeho sat in the ship's first-class lounge, staring at his datapad. Lieutenant Ji-Young Park had given him access to the ship's cultural database, but the information about Centaurian challenges of honor was limited. More coffee, Captain. Lieutenant Park appeared beside him, holding a steaming cup. Thank you, Daeho said, taking the cup. Have you found anything useful in the security databases? Ji-Young sat down across from him. Not much, but I did discover something interesting. Ambassador Shaq has been involved in 3 similar incidents in the past year. Daeho looked up from his datapad. What happened to the other challengers? That's the strange part, Ji-Young said, lowering her voice. All 3 ended up in high-ranking positions in the Galactic Defense Coalition within months of their challenges. Before Daeho could respond, a soft chime sounded throughout the lounge. Attention please, the ship's AI announced. All participants in the Centaurian Challenge of Honor should report to Deck 7, Diplomatic Suite Alpha. Daeho stood up, straightening his clothes. Well, I guess it's time. Good luck, Ji-Young said. I'll be there as security oversight. The diplomatic suite on Deck 7 was enormous. The room had been transformed into what looked like a combination of a testing center and a ceremonial space. Ambassador Shaq stood in the center, now wearing formal Centaurian robes that made him look even taller. "Welcome, Captain Kim," the ambassador said. "Are you prepared to face the challenge of honor?" Dae-ho nodded, trying to look more confident than he felt. "I am, Ambassador." "Excellent. The challenge consists of 3 tests," Ambassador Shaq explained. "Each test represents a crucial aspect of what we look for in our galactic partners." One of the ambassador's assistants stepped forward with a large crystal cube. Inside the cube, holographic images danced and shifted. "Your first test," the ambassador announced, "is the test of perception. You must identify which of these holographic scenarios represents a real threat and which are merely distractions. This tests your ability to see beyond the obvious." The crystal cube floated toward Dae-ho. Inside, he saw multiple scenes playing out: a trade negotiation, a spaceship maintenance operation, a cultural exchange ceremony, and what appeared to be a children's game. Dae-ho studied each scene carefully. His military training kicked in, and he noticed something odd about the children's game. The players were using movement patterns similar to military formations. "The children's game," he said firmly. "It's not a game at all. It's a covert training exercise disguised as a cultural activity." The ambassador's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Interesting. Most candidates focus on the trade negotiation, assuming economic threats are primary. You saw the hidden military aspect." "Correct, Captain." Dae-ho felt a small surge of confidence, but the ambassador wasn't finished. "The second test is the test of adaptation," Ambassador Shaq said. "You must complete a Centaurian greeting ritual. However, you must do it in a way that honors both your human heritage and our customs." A platform rose from the floor, carrying what looked like ceremonial objects: a bowl of shimmering liquid, a set of crystalline chimes, and a strange mechanical device. Dae-ho approached the platform, studying the objects. He remembered something from his cultural studies about Centaurian greetings involving both sound and movement. But there was also a strong human diplomatic tradition of handshakes and eye contact. He picked up the mechanical device, which hummed softly in his hands. After a moment's thought, he used it to strike the crystal chimes in a simple pattern. The sound reminded him of an old earth melody. Then he dipped his fingers in the shimmering liquid and extended his hand toward the ambassador, combining the Centaurian liquid-sharing custom with the human handshake. "The melody you created," the ambassador said. "It was your Earth military recognition signal, wasn't it? Combined with our greeting customs. Very clever." Before Dae-ho could respond, the lights in the room dimmed suddenly. Emergency indicators began flashing. "Warning," the ship's AI announced. "Environmental system malfunction detected on Deck 7. Oxygen levels decreasing. Your final test begins now." Ambassador Shaq said calmly, even as other passengers in the diplomatic suite began to panic. "The test of crisis management." Dae-ho looked around quickly. Lieutenant Park was already moving to calm the other passengers, but he noticed something odd about the emergency indicators. The pattern of their flashing wasn't random. It matched the rhythm he had just played on the crystal chimes. He rushed to the environmental control panel, but instead of trying to override it directly, he used the ceremonial chimes to create a countering rhythm. The panel responded, its lights synchronizing with the chimes. "Interesting approach," the ambassador observed, "using ceremonial instruments to interface with emergency systems. Why?" "Because this isn't just a test of crisis management," Dae-ho said as he worked. "It's a test of whether I learned from the previous challenges. The first test showed that threats can be hidden in plain sight. The second taught me about combining different cultural approaches. This emergency is a chance to use both lessons." The emergency lights stopped flashing. The room's atmosphere returned to normal, and the other passengers applauded, realizing they had witnessed something significant. Ambassador Shaq raised all 4 of his hands for silence. "Captain Kim, you have completed the challenge of honor in a most unexpected way. Rather than following our traditional methods, you created your own solutions while respecting the principles behind our customs. The ambassador turned to address everyone in the room. This is exactly why Earth interests us. Your species has an unusual ability to adapt and innovate while maintaining respect for established protocols. It is a rare combination in our experience. Lieutenant Park stepped forward. Ambassador, does this mean? Yes, Ambassador Shaq said. Captain Kim's performance today will be reported to the Galactic Defense Coalition Council. But more importantly, it has demonstrated why humanity deserves a greater role in galactic affairs. Daeho felt overwhelming relief, followed by confusion. Ambassador, may I ask a question? Of course. Was my comment about the basketball player really what triggered this challenge? The ambassador's skin rippled with what Daeho now recognized as amusement. Captain, in diplomacy, sometimes we create opportunities to test potential allies. Your comment simply provided a convenient opening. The real test was how you would handle the consequences of a cultural misstep. As the other passengers and crew members congratulated him, Daeho caught Lieutenant Park's eye. She smiled and nodded toward her data pad, where a message was displayed. Incoming transmission from Earth Defense Force Command. Priority level. Highest. This vacation had definitely not turned out as planned. But as Daeho watched Ambassador Shaq speaking with his assistants, he realized that sometimes the best opportunities come from the most embarrassing moments. The rest of the journey to Nova Centauri was going to be very interesting indeed. The celebration in the diplomatic suite had barely ended when Officer Sunwoo Lee, the ship's chief investigator, requested an urgent meeting with Daeho and Lieutenant Park. They gathered in a small conference room adjacent to the first-class cabin. Something about this situation doesn't add up, Sunwoo said, activating a holographic display on the conference table. I've been reviewing Ambassador Shaq travel patterns over the past 3 years. The hologram showed a complex web of flight paths between Earth and various alien worlds. Certain routes glowed brighter than others, forming a clear pattern. Every major technological trade agreement between Earth and the Galactic Defense Coalition was signed within 2 weeks of the ambassador's visits, Sunwoo explained. And each time, there was an incident involving a human passing a challenge. Lieutenant Park leaned forward, studying the pattern. So this wasn't just a random encounter. The ambassador was looking for something specific. Exactly, Sunwoo said. But here's where it gets interesting. I found encrypted communications between the ambassador's ship and Earth Defense Force headquarters dating back 6 months. Daeho felt his heart rate increase. Are you saying Earth Defense Force knew about this? Before Sunwoo could answer, the door opened. Ambassador Shaq entered the room, having to duck slightly under the doorframe. Behind him, a human woman in an Earth Defense Force admiral's uniform appeared on a secure holographic channel. At ease, Captain Kim, Admiral Hae-Yun Kang said. I believe it's time we explained what's really happening. The ambassador settled into a specially reinforced chair. Captain, your encounter with me was not entirely accidental. Earth Defense Force has been helping us identify potential candidates for a special initiative. We've been watching your career, Daeho, Admiral Kang continued. Your unique approach to problem-solving caught our attention. The incident with the Martian mining dispute last year was particularly impressive. Daeho remembered that mission. He had prevented a war between corporate mining factions by introducing an old Earth game theory concept to their negotiation process. It hadn't been the traditional military solution, but it had worked. The Galactic Defense Coalition is facing a crisis, Ambassador Shaq said. Our traditional approaches to galactic security are failing. New threats are emerging that don't follow the old rules of engagement. Lieutenant Park's communication device buzzed. She checked it, and her eyes widened. Sir, we're receiving reports of unusual activity near the Outer Rim colonies. Multiple ships are disappearing without explanation. Precisely, the ambassador said. This is why we need humans. Your species has a remarkable ability to find unconventional solutions to complex problems. The challenge of honor wasn't just a test, it was an evaluation of your potential to help reform our entire defense strategy. Engineer He-Jin Cho, who had been quietly monitoring the ship's systems in the background, spoke up. Ambassador, the energy signatures we're detecting from those disappearing ships. They matched the theoretical patterns in Project Mirrorgate. The ambassador's 4 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of surprise that Daho was beginning to recognize. You know about Project Mirrorgate. I helped design some of its components, He-Jin said. But we abandoned it because the technology was too unpredictable. Are you saying someone else completed the research? Admiral Kang's hologram flickered. That's classified information. But yes, someone has weaponized the mirror gate technology. They're using it to make entire ships vanish into parallel space pockets. We don't know how to track them, much less stop them. Daho looked at the data scrolling across the conference room's displays. The patterns reminded him of something he had seen during the Challenge of Honor, the way the emergency system had responded to musical harmonies. The crystal chimes, he said suddenly. During the challenge, they weren't just ceremonial instruments, were they? The frequencies they produced. They're similar to the mirror gate energy signatures. Ambassador Shaq Thrax's skin rippled with approval. This is exactly why we need human insight. You see connections that our more structured thinking processes miss. The ceremonial technologies of my people and the theoretical physics of yours might hold the key to solving this crisis. But why the elaborate setup? Lieutenant Park asked. Why not just recruit Captain Kim directly? Because we needed to see how humans perform under genuine pressure, not in a controlled test environment, Admiral Kang explained. The best solutions often come from real situations, even if they seem uncomfortable or embarrassing at first. Daho thought about his initial reaction to the ambassador, the casual comment about basketball that had started everything. You deliberately made yourself a target for cultural misunderstandings, he said to the ambassador. You wanted to see how humans handle diplomatic mistakes. Indeed, Ambassador Shaq Thrax said. In a galaxy full of different species and cultures, the ability to recover from and learn from such mistakes is crucial. Your response to the challenge showed us that humans can adapt without losing their unique perspective. The ship's lights flickered briefly. Engineer He-Jin checked his instruments. We're picking up unusual energy readings from the cargo hold. The pattern matches the mirror gate signatures. Admiral Kang's expression turned serious. It seems our opponents are aware of this meeting. Captain Kim, consider this your first real mission. Those disappearing ships aren't just a theoretical problem anymore. They're here. The ambassador stood, his impressive height somehow more reassuring than intimidating now. The challenge of honor was just the beginning, Captain. The real test starts now. Are you ready to help us face this threat? Daho looked at Lieutenant Park, who nodded firmly, then at Officer Sunwoo and Engineer He-Jin, who both showed clear determination on their faces. This vacation had turned into something far more important than he could have imagined. Ready or not, he said, it seems humanity is about to play a bigger role in galactic affairs than anyone expected. And it all started with a bad joke about basketball. Ambassador Shaq Thrax made a sound that might have been a laugh. Sometimes, Captain, the most important diplomatic breakthroughs begin with a simple misunderstanding. Now, shall we go save some ships? As they hurried toward the cargo hold, Daho realized that his future, and possibly humanity's, had changed forever because he couldn't keep quiet during a first-class flight. Life had a strange way of working out sometimes. The cargo hold of the luxury starship was not designed for combat situations. Yet here they were, Daho and his impromptu team, preparing to face an unknown threat. The hold's massive space was filled with containers and expensive luggage, all casting strange shadows in the emergency lighting. Engineer He-Jin worked quickly at a control panel, his fingers moving across the holographic display. The energy readings are getting stronger. Whatever's using the mirror gate technology, it's trying to create a portal here. Ambassador Shaq produced a set of crystal chimes from his diplomatic bag. Captain Kim, remember how you used these during the Challenge of Honor? We need that kind of creative thinking now. Lieutenant Park positioned security barriers around the area while Officer Sunwoo monitored the ship's sensors. 3 more ships have vanished in nearby sectors, Sunwoo reported. The pattern is moving toward us. First test, the ambassador announced, as if they were still in the formal challenge. Strategic thinking in zero gravity. Before Daho could ask what he meant, He Jin's voice rang out. Artificial gravity failing in the cargo hold. Everything not bolted down began to float. Daho grabbed a handrail as his feet left the floor. The crystal chimes drifted up, creating soft notes as they collided with each other. The intruders are trying to destabilize the ship, Ambassador Shaq said, his large form somehow graceful in zero gravity. How do you respond, Captain? Daho watched the floating cargo containers and had an idea. He-Jin, can you give me control of the cargo magnetic locks? The engineer tapped his panel. Done. But what are you planning? In zero gravity, everything is a potential weapon or shield, Daho said. He activated the magnetic locks in sequence, creating a moving barrier of cargo containers. If they want to open a portal here, they'll have to deal with randomly moving obstacles first. The ambassador's skin rippled with approval. Using our own cargo against us, a very human solution. But now comes the second test, cultural adaptation and understanding. A shimmer appeared in the center of the cargo hold, the beginning of a mirror gate portal. Through the distortion, they could see figures moving. They weren't human, but they weren't Centaurian either. Those markings, Sunwoo said, studying the figures through his scanner. They're from the Outer Rim Collective. But why would they steal our ships? Daho remembered his cultural training. The Outer Rim Collective was known for its complex honor system and belief in technological equality. They're not stealing the ships, he realized. They're trying to prevent what they see as unfair technological advancement. Our partnership with the Centaurians threatens their belief in balanced progress. Correct, Ambassador Shaq said. But how do you resolve a cultural conflict in the middle of an attack? Daho grabbed the floating crystal chimes. The notes they produced seemed to interact with the portal's energy field. Everyone, grab a chime, he ordered. He-Jin, can you match the ship's communication frequency to these tones? As the team caught the floating chimes, Daho began a simple sequence of notes. In Outer Rim culture, music is used to signal peaceful intentions, but we're going to combine it with something else. He nodded to Lieutenant Park, who understood immediately. Park activated the ship's external speakers and began broadcasting. The sound of the crystal chimes mixed with an old Earth melody, the universal distress signal used by spacers of all species. The combination created an eerie harmony that made the portal fluctuate. The third test, Ambassador Shaq announced, crisis management. The portal was growing unstable. The figures on the other side seemed confused by the musical message. He-Jin's panel lit up with warnings. The portal is feeding back on itself. If it collapses, it could take half the ship with it. No, Daho said firmly. It's not just a weapon or a portal, it's a bridge. He-Jin, remember what you said about Project Mirrorgate. It wasn't just about making ships disappear. It was about creating connections. Understanding dawned on He-Jin's face. He adjusted his controls, synchronizing the ship's engines with the musical frequency. The portal's energy began to stabilize, but in a different way. Through the now stable portal, they could see the missing ships trapped in a pocket of twisted space. The Outer Rim figures began sending their own musical signals, not hostile anymore, but curious. They weren't trying to destroy the ships, Daho explained. They were collecting them as evidence of what they saw as cultural contamination. But now they see we can blend technologies and traditions without losing either. Ambassador Shaq floated forward. And this, Captain Kim, is why humanity's perspective is so valuable. You don't just solve problems, you transform them into opportunities for understanding. Working together, the team used the combination of crystal chimes, earth distress signals, and mirror gate technology to create a stable passage. The missing ships began emerging one by one. The Outer Rim observers sent signals of their own, indicating a willingness to discuss their concerns through proper diplomatic channels. As artificial gravity slowly returned, Daho found himself standing next to Lieutenant Park. "You know," she said with a small smile, "for someone who started this trip by insulting an ambassador, you've done pretty well." "Indeed," Ambassador Shaq Thrax agreed. "The Galactic Defense Coalition needs people who can make mistakes, learn from them, and turn them into victories. Though perhaps next time, Captain, you could find a less dramatic way to start the process." Daho looked around the cargo hold. Floating luggage was settling back to the floor. The crystal chimes were still humming softly. Through the viewing ports, he could see the rescued ships rejoining the normal space lanes, all because of a series of events that started with a thoughtless comment about basketball. "Sometimes the best solutions come from the strangest beginnings," he said. "But yes, next time I'll try to be more diplomatic in first class." The ambassador made that sound that Daho now recognized as laughter. "Don't be too diplomatic, Captain. The galaxy needs more of humanity's unique approach to problems. Now, shall we go explain to the other passengers why their luggage was floating?" As they made their way back to the passenger deck, Daho realized that this wouldn't be his last adventure with this unusual team. The galaxy was changing, and humanity's role in it was growing in unexpected ways, all because of a first-class flight that turned into something much more interesting than a simple vacation. The main conference room on Nova Centauri's Central Space Station was filled with representatives from across the galaxy. 2 weeks had passed since the incident on the luxury starship, and now it was time to deal with the consequences. Daho sat between Lieutenant Park and Officer Sunwoo, feeling slightly uncomfortable in his new formal uniform. The Earth Defense Force had promoted him to Special Diplomatic Liaison, a position that hadn't existed until a week ago. Ambassador Shaq Thrax stood at the center of the room, his impressive height drawing all eyes. "Members of the Galactic Council," he began, "we are here to discuss recent events that have changed our understanding of interspecies cooperation." The ambassador gestured to a holographic display showing the luxury starship incident. What began as a simple cultural misunderstanding led to the resolution of multiple crises. Captain Kim's handling of the situation demonstrated exactly what we have been seeking. A representative from the Outer Rim Collective stood up. Unlike their first encounter in the cargo hold, they now wore formal diplomatic robes. "We admit our methods were extreme," they said, "but we feared the loss of cultural identity in the rush for technological advancement." And that fear was valid, Daho said, standing up. He had practiced this speech many times with Lieutenant Park. "But what we discovered is that technology and culture don't have to fight each other. They can make each other stronger." Engineer He-Jin activated a demonstration. The crystal chimes from the cargo hold incident floated in the center of the room, playing the harmony that had helped stabilize the mirror gate. This time, the music was joined by traditional sounds from a dozen different species. "The solution we found wasn't just about saving ships," Daho continued. "It showed us that we can combine different approaches to solve bigger problems." The crystal chimes of Centauri worked with Earth's distress signals and the Outer Rim's musical traditions to create something new. Admiral Kang's hologram appeared at the council table. Based on these events, Earth Defense Force proposes the creation of a new division, the Cultural Integration and Technology Exchange Program. Captain Kim and his team have shown us that our greatest strength lies in combining our differences, not fighting over them. The room buzzed with discussion. Ambassador Shaq Thrax raised all 4 hands for silence. "There is more. The Galactic Defense Coalition has voted to fast-track Earth's application for full membership, with some conditions." Lieutenant Park leaned over to whisper to Daho, "This is what we were working toward all along, isn't it?" Daho nodded. The ambassador's carefully planned series of tests, the staged confrontation on the luxury ship, even the Outer Rim Collective's intervention. All of it had been leading to this moment. The conditions are simple. The ambassador continued. Earth will leave the new Cultural Integration Program. Captain Kim and his team have already demonstrated the potential of this approach. Their methods will become part of our standard protocols. Officer Sun Wu's datapad lit up with incoming messages. Sir, he said quietly to Daho, we're receiving applications from across Earth. Other species want to learn our way of problem solving. A Centaurian council member spoke up. But how can we be sure this wasn't just a lucky accident? One human making a fortunate mistake. That's exactly the point, Ambassador Shaq said. Humans don't just solve problems. They turn mistakes into opportunities. Captain Kim's initial cultural misstep led to innovations we hadn't considered in centuries of formal diplomacy. The ambassador turned to face Daho directly. When you compared me to a basketball player, you broke traditional protocol. But in doing so, you showed us that sometimes breaking protocol is exactly what we need to move forward. The Outer Rim representative added, our people were wrong to fear human influence. We now see that your species doesn't erase cultural differences. You find ways to make them work together. Admiral Kang's hologram smiled. And that is why Earth Defense Force chose Captain Kim for this mission. His record showed a pattern of unconventional solutions that maintained respect for all parties involved. Daho looked at his team, Lieutenant Park with her steady professionalism, Officer Sunwoo with his careful attention to detail, and Engineer He-jin with his brilliant technical mind. They had all played crucial roles in turning a potentially disastrous situation into a breakthrough. We accept the conditions, Daho said formally. Earth will help build bridges between different species and their technologies. But we have one condition of our own. The council members stirred with interest. Ambassador Shaq skin rippled with curiosity. And what would that be, Captain? That we maintain the right to make mistakes, Daho said. Not careless ones, but the kind of mistakes that come from trying new things and thinking differently. Because sometimes, the best solutions start with someone saying exactly the wrong thing at exactly the right time. The ambassador's response was immediate. Agreed. In fact, I believe we should make it official policy that some degree of cultural flexibility is necessary for true progress. As the council members voted unanimously to accept these terms, Daho couldn't help but smile. His vacation had turned into humanity's biggest diplomatic breakthrough, all because he couldn't keep quiet about basketball. Lieutenant Park touched his arm. Ready to start your new job, Captain? We have a lot of cultures to mix up. Just one thing first, Daho said. He turned to Ambassador Shaq. Sir, do you actually know anything about basketball? The ambassador's 4 eyes twinkled. Captain, I've been a fan of Earth sports for decades. Your comment wasn't as insulting as you thought, though watching you figure that out was quite entertaining. The entire council chamber filled with laughter, different sounds from different species, but all sharing the same feeling of amusement and hope for the future. As the formal ceremony began to wrap up, Daho made a mental note. Sometimes the best way to handle a mistake is to turn it into something bigger than yourself. And maybe, just maybe, his next vacation would be a bit less eventful. But somehow, as he looked at his new team and thought about their upcoming missions, he doubted it.